Shana Tova, Shana Tova Umataka. May you have a sweet and good year. Tonight begins Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish celebration of the New Year. Beginning of the year, and also the beginning of the High Holy Days, the most important time in the Jewish liturgical year. Much more important than Hanukkah, the Jewish holiday that most often gets attention because of its proximity to Christmas. We don't have to do Hanukkah, but we've got to do the High Holy Days. It's a time for intensive personal reflection and shared renewal. It's kind of like, you know how there are Easter and Christmas Catholics, or Easter and Christmas Christians. There are High Holy Day Jews. This is the time. If you're going to show up for something, this is what you show up for. So they begin with Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, the Feast of Trumpets. We were looking for a shofar. We didn't find one this year. Next year. Tonight, I look forward to cutting up an apple and dipping it in honey, following that tradition that the first taste of the new year be sweet, that good and sweet new year. A reminder of the beautiful gifts of the earth. But amidst the Feast of Trumpets and this sweetness, it is really a much more complicated holiday. Following Rosh Hashanah are the 10 days of awe, which are also called the 10 days of repentance, when the practice is to reflect on the past year before Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And I'm guessing that for some of you already now, repentance and atonement are starting to get under your skin a little. Does anyone have that experience? Repentance is one of those words that's kind of like a... No? Is it full? Okay, so maybe it's me. Because, of course, repentance brings up sin, right? If we're repenting for something, what are we repenting for? It brings up the idea of sin, it brings up original sin, and then all those other things that we just really don't want to think about and certainly don't believe in here. But one thing that helps me get there in this context is that the Jewish notion of sin is quite different from the predominant Christian one in the culture. The traditional Jewish understanding of sin is simply to miss the mark. We all miss the mark sometimes, fall short of our aspirations and intentions, don't live up to our highest selves. And so we've got these 10 days. These 10 days, I think of it like it's 10 days to kind of get your homework done, take stock of the past year. And what I'm asked to take stock of in this time is what I need to forgive and let go of, and what I want to be forgiven for from my past year in order to start anew. And honestly, I realized as I prepared for this today that I could use this spiritual practice right now. I could use some time to sort through the past, the last year, and name those things that I'm ready to let go of so I can start anew. And so if you're drawn to that as well, this is not a requirement, but I just invite you in if you'd like to join me in this practice in the next 10 days. There won't be any follow-up. There's no test at the end. No one to check in and see, did you really do it or not? But if you want to just take a moment or let it float along gently by you the next 10 days, what would you like to let go of? Because simply put, the wisdom in the High Holy Days is this: if you want to start something new, if you want a fresh beginning, you must make room by releasing the past. And that, of course, is the really hard part of the holiday. Forgiveness. So complicated, so much more to say about it than I will today, but my favorite frame for forgiveness, is this quote you may have heard. It's hard to tell exactly who said it. It's one of those ones that gets attributed to all sorts of people. Lily Tomlin is one of them. We'll give it to Lily Tomlin. Forgiveness means giving up all hope of a better past. It's kind of simple when you say it like that. In Jewish mythology, it's so important at this time of the year because God chronicles the past year on Rosh Hashanah. It's Rosh Hashanah, everything gets written down for the past year, but it's just a draft. You've got 10 days to look it over, give your proof, your edits, to ask for, to offer, and receive forgiveness before the final draft is then published on Yom Kippur. Then it's all said and done. I don't know about that part, but things do stick with us if we don't deal with them. So of course, it's important this time of year in the Jewish calendar, but it really is an essential religious practice, religious question, this question of forgiveness, all year around. And while sometimes they miss the mark, there are religious rituals that grapple with forgiveness in a way that I think our secular culture today has really struggled to. In our secular culture, we do know how to punish. We perhaps know something about rehabilitation, oh, not much. We certainly know how to incriminate and blame, but rarely to forgive. Forgive, very different than punishment and rehabilitation. And in my mind, the classic example of forgiveness ritual in our culture, the kind of wider culture's forgiveness ritual, is that playground scene. Do you know the playground scene that I'm talking about? You've got two kids who are clearly in tears probably streaking on their faces, and there's bubbling anger and resentment still, and there's a he said and she did and he did, and the teacher comes up. Not you, if you're a teacher, I'm sure you don't do it like this. But the teacher comes up, and the teacher says, okay, say I'm sorry, shake hands, make up. That's our forgiveness ritual. And I think that's changing. I don't want to be too blithe about it, but I do think that's what we know about forgiveness in our culture. So what really allows us to let go of the past so we may begin again? I can't answer that question, but I am going to now, with some trepidation, dip my toe into Canadian politics for a story about beginning again. So I am an outsider here, and I look forward to hearing your corrections. And I ask for forgiveness in advance. Justin Trudeau. Oh, what a relief we've heard about this fresh young face, about such a turnaround from a previous administration who I understand shall not be named. And one exciting part of that we've been hearing about is a new beginning, a fresh start again on climate change. That was one of the things that we heard there's a lot of excitement about this administration. And our friend Christine Boyle, she's a colleague of ours from seminary. We went to Star King, the Unitarian school in Berkeley with her. She's from Vancouver and serves the Canadian Memorial United Church, kind of south of downtown. She posted on Facebook this week about the Trudeau turnaround. She shared, I was in Paris to hear Justin Trudeau tell the world Canada is back. And then she shared an article about the approval this week of the LNG pipeline. Now, I know there may be mixed opinions about the pipeline. I'm not wanting to declare on a side here, but I want to glean a couple of learnings. So let me tell you that led me to learning about the black rod. Do you know about the black rod? Is everybody familiar with the black rod? Not everyone. Okay, so the black rod, it's a ritual item in the BC legislature. It's a replica or a reflective of a similar ritual item in the British Parliament, which apparently now there are these black rods in parliaments from the Commonwealth across the globe. It has rings. It's just a nice black rod with some silver rings. And then there was a big symbolic ceremony this last week while Prince William and Kate were in town to add a fourth ring to the black rod. The first three rings were there for the BC government and the government of Canada and the government of Westminster. And the fourth ring was added for BC First Nations. So a significant, if perhaps somewhat strange symbol. And I have to tell you how exciting it is coming from the States to see that there is work here happening to reconcile with First Nations, to come to terms with a painful past so something new can emerge. And Emily and I are committed to learning more about the history here. We're looking forward to introducing ourselves to First Nation folks here on the North Shore, finding out how we can be good allies as new white clergy in town. And we're looking forward to connecting with Samaya Oakley and with Meg Roberts, the UU clergy who've been developing a guide for UU congregations to engage the truth and reconciliation process that's happened around the schools. But so there they were having this black rod ceremony with Prince William. But Stuart Phillip, who is the Grand Chief of the Union of BC Chiefs, announced he would not attend. Because after speaking with other chiefs, he said they determined it would not be appropriate for me to participate in a reconciliation ceremony at this time. Apparently, a ring on the black rod, even placed by Prince William himself, may not be enough to set things right. There were other chiefs there. The BC regional chief, Shane Gottfriedson, he did attend, and he said this at the ceremony: "But we must remember that reconciliation is not merely symbolic, nor is it a destination. It is an action and a journey that must manifest in relationship building." It's an action and a journey that must manifest in relationship building. Which brings us back to Christine's Facebook post, because the very next day, the LNG pipeline project was approved, 24 hours after this ceremony, against the continued and adamant opposition of many of the coastal First Nations whose traditional land would be impacted. For many, the approval was a betrayal of those hopeful words spoken in Paris last year. What happened to the new beginning? The truth about climate change, I gather from folks like Jim Stevenson and our cousin Molly, who really actually understand the science of what's going on. The truth is, according to those folks, that we've most likely already passed the tipping point. The chances for avoiding a change in the Earth's climate that will be catastrophic for humanity are minimal. The outlook on climate change tastes not of apples and honey, but of ash, of bitter, rising sea levels. That outlook is one among many reasons that the Buddhist systems philosopher Joanna Macy calls this time either the great unraveling or the great turning. She says both are still possible. And to do the meaningful work of aiding in the great turning in what the Jewish tradition would call tikkun olam, the healing of the world, we have to be able to have new beginnings, feasts of trumpets, apples and honey with all their hope and excitement, even knowing what we know about the odds. We have to be able to look at things anew, have a fresh start, despite that fear and even hopelessness. Joanna Macy's body of work devoted to helping people continue to take hopeful action in the face of bleak circumstances has become known as the work that reconnects. And the image that holds her work is a spiral with 4 phases. The first is coming from gratitude. to be grateful for the gifts that we have received, to enjoy and pay attention to what is good. It's why we end most of the meetings that Emily and I lead with a moment of gratitude, a moment to share those things that we're feeling grateful for from our time together. And then from that place, we want to then turn to honoring our pain for the world. That's the second in her spiral, honoring our pain for the world. Taking a good hard look at what has gone wrong, at what is going wrong. Not sweeping it under the rug or trying to stuff it like the water bottle last week down in the bottom of the bag. Honoring our pain for the world, which then, once we have done, allows us to move into the third piece of seeing with fresh eyes. Seeing with new eyes requires having honored our pain. That's the crux of this holiday we're in. And then we can go forth to take action. So the spiral, it has been seen in many rituals and traditions. It's a pathway, I think, familiar to the human spirit, to the human psyche. In the high holy days, we start with gratitude as we taste the sweet apple. As we prepare for the day of atonement, we recognize and honor our pain. And practicing forgiveness of self and others allows us to see with new eyes, so we're prepared to go forth and start the year anew. So one more practice, one more ritual of the High Holy Days that I want to mention. We'll do it together here another year. On the afternoon of Rosh Hashanah, Jews across the world gather along oceans, lakes, bays, rivers, and seas. As they drop breadcrumbs into the water, ancient words from the Hebrew Bible, from the book of Micah, are spoken. You will cast all their sins into the depths of the sea. I remember standing at the table at my UU church. It was an altar table right in the front of the sanctuary. On the other side, the compassionate eyes of an adult in my church offered a loving reassurance. In our hands, we held the broken bits and pieces of bread, that bread of life. These breadcrumbs resting in our hands had come to represent all the broken moments of the year that had passed. Resentments and disappointments, flares of anger, acts of bitterness and spite, the times of shortcoming, of failing to act, of neglected commitments, of distraction and preoccupation, of mindless consumption, of missing the mark. All these broken moments gathered almost weightless as breadcrumbs in the palms of our hands. We turned our hands over, and the breadcrumbs dropped into a vase of water. Lightly, they sprinkled so many broken moments of shortcoming into the water. As we had been invited to do, we let our eye connection linger, that adult across from me, witnessing to the fullness of forgiveness available to each of us as the crumbs slowly sank into the water. Within moments, they would soften and dissolve. They would be held by the waters now. Held in our planet's vast cycling and recycling of matter, held by something so much greater than our own hands. And our empty hands, free and light, were now ready for a new year. But remembering this ritual, I am also mindful of the words of Chief Godfredson. Ritual, symbol can be powerful, even pivotal, and yet reconciliation is not a destination, but an action and a journey that must result in relationship building. Dropping breadcrumbs into water alone will not melt away resentment or make forgiveness real. We really do have to fill the sack with wheat and take it over to our brother's land. Singing that we forgive ourselves and each other, as I will invite us to do in a moment, still does not make it so. But it does remind us of the journey. It does set our intentions and strengthen our resolve to make peace with what has passed in order to make space for something new to begin. So I wonder, what crumbs do your hands hold? What would you like to release? What shortcomings weigh heavily on your heart? Imagine for a moment, close your eyes if it helps, that you hold whatever burdens you in your hands. Today, in your imagination at least, let those burdens become light as breadcrumbs, and in this time of renewal, imagine turning them over to a river or a lake, to this community, to life, to divine mystery, to the depths of the sea, to something greater than yourself. And I invite you to join me in this litany, this ritual of atonement. The music, it's in the Teal hymnal, but you don't need it. It's simply this: we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. We'll sing it several times through. We'll say some words in between. As we do, I invite you to consider even looking around the room, perhaps catching the eye of another here. May each of us receive the compassionate gaze of understanding when we long for forgiveness, when we long for atonement. May each of us open our hands again, free and light and ready for a new year.